Futures are improving not only for potential physicians, but also for other qualified dyslexic professional hopefuls, including attorneys. Despite what attorneys and judges know about the poor predictability of the LSAT, it remains a gatekeeper for prospective attorneys. By many accounts, the Law School Admissions Council, LSAC, the organization responsible for the LSAT, has been particularly rigid about accepting requests for accommodations from dyslexic students. A 2011 Government Accountability Office, GAO, report concluded while there have been significant changes in the law governing accommodations, testing companies have not changed their policies and practice. A major recommendation in the report states that it is imperative for justice to establish a credible enforcement presence to detect, correct, and prevent violations. Responding to the GAO's recommendations, the DOJ opened systematic investigations into the actions of specific testing agencies, focusing on those whose actions have resulted in an especially large number of complaints from disabled applicants. The most serious offender was the LSAC, the first agency the DOJ investigated. As a result, the LSAC has entered into a consent decree with the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing and the United States regarding testing accommodations for individuals with disabilities nationwide. The consent decree states, quote, LSAC shall ensure that documentation requests are reasonable and limited to the need for the testing accommodation requested, end quote. For those candidates whose documentation establishes that they previously were approved to receive testing accommodations on any standardized examination offered in the United States related to applications for post-secondary admission, and with respect to the testing accommodations for which they were previously approved, the consent decree goes on to say, LSAC shall require no more documentation than proof of the approval for such testing accommodations and certification by the candidate through a checkmark box on the candidate form that the candidate is still experiencing the functional limitations caused by the disability or disabilities for which testing accommodations were approved. Acceptable proof of prior testing accommodations shall consist of a letter or similar documentation from the other test sponsor confirming that testing accommodations were approved and specifically identifying what those approved testing accommodations were. Upon receipt of such proof, in accordance with LSAC's established deadlines, without further inquiry or request for additional documentation, LSAC shall grant those previously approved testing accommodations or the equivalent testing accommodation offered on the LSAT with respect to requests for extended time up to double time, as well as certain other testing accommodations. What about flagging? The practice of flagging the scores of tests taken with accommodations has been distressing to many students with disabilities. While the purpose of the accommodation is to place those with disabilities on a par with others taking the test, the asterisk placed next to the score telegraphs to all who see it that the test taker has a disability. The evidence is strong that once an admissions committee sees the asterisk, the tendency is to place that applicant's file on the bottom of the pile. The asterisk identifies the applicant as having an exception, and his scores as ones the testing organization cannot validate. A blue ribbon panel was formed to re-examine flagging and make recommendations for the major standardized test, the SAT-1. On July 15, 2002, the panel released its findings. The majority position of the panel was to discontinue the practice of flagging the SAT-1 based on scientific, psychometric, and social evidence. I served on the panel and joined in the majority opinion, which noted the, quote, compelling evidence against flagging.